All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unraveling what is basically an epic, thousands of years old heist to democratize the law. We're going to look at how an ancient struggle for legal transparency connects directly to the cutting-edge world of smart contracts and network states. Seriously, if you've ever wondered why our legal systems feel so incredibly complex and, let's be honest, completely walled off, well, you're absolutely in the right place.
So, to understand why legal services are just so painfully expensive today, we really have to start by asking a basic question. Why is the legal profession historically designed to be so exclusive in the first place? Throughout history, societies naturally form these cooperative bonds and rules from the ground up, way before a formal legal class ever exists. But eventually, a highly literate, specialized class steps in to act as the stewards of these rules. And that is when things start to change.
And that brings us to a really foundational sociological framework, the critical difference between an open, merit-based class and a rigid, closed caste. See, when the law is managed by an open class, it's accessible, it's fluid based on merit. But human nature, it often pushes these groups to harden into a caste that hoards power. They do this by relying on what we call purity taboos and strict professional endogamy. Think about modern regulations like Rule 5.4, which literally bans lawyers from partnering with non-lawyers. It's a system designed to keep outsiders away and maintain absolute authority over the rules that govern our everyday lives.
To see how deep this goes, we're starting our journey in ancient Rome. Back then, the College of Pontiffs acted as the ultimate legal caste. This was a patrician-dominated priestly body, and they maintained an absolute, highly secretive grip on literally all matters of justice. In early Rome, the law was definitely not public information. The pontiffs essentially functioned as a structural barrier, keeping the rules of the game completely hidden from the working-class plebeians, locking them behind both literal and figurative iron gates.
Now, to maintain this total monopoly, the pontiffs weaponized two pretty obscure concepts. First, they closely guarded the fausti, which was a secret schedule dictating exactly which days a court was actually allowed to sit. But even more powerful were the legis actionis. These were highly guarded, completely secret verbal formulas that you absolutely had to know to bring an action in court. Roman law was incredibly formalistic, so if a regular citizen misspoke even a single syllable of these hidden formulas, boom, they instantly lost their case. It was, honestly, the perfect gatekeeping mechanism.
But then enter our ancient corporate espionage hacker, Gnaeus Flavius. Flavius was the son of a freedman, just a lowly scribe working for a very prominent patrician named Appius Claudius Caecus. And according to the ancient historian Livy, Flavius pulled off the ultimate heist against his boss. He exploited his subordinate role to secretly memorize and document all those hidden formulas. He basically stole Appius's notebook to give the law back to the people. No way, right? But he actually did it.
By bravely publishing these procedures on whitened wooden boards in the public square of the Roman Forum back in 304 BC, Flavius completely shattered that priestly monopoly. This compilation became known as the Jus Flavianum, and it finally allowed common plebeians to access the courts without having to rely on the patrician priests. He became this massive working-class hero. He was even eventually elected as curule aedile. His actions transformed the law from this mystical, hidden priestly rite into a secular, transparent, explorable science. It was essentially the world's very first massive open-source data dump.
Looking back through history, it becomes super clear that breaking legal cartels isn't just some one-off event from antiquity. It's a continuous generational struggle. We can trace this fight for democratization all the way from Flavius to the medieval law students of Bologna, right up to modern digital smart contracts. It's this ongoing epic battle between the grassroots desire for open law and the elite tendency to just close it all off again. Just like Flavius, the foreign students at the University of Bologna had to band together into a democratic guild to reclaim the law from the elites. In 1088 CE, these students, who actually lacked civic rights in Bologna, formed the Universitas Scholarium. It was basically a mutual defense corporation. And get this, they actively governed their own professors. They literally hired them directly, paid them from pooled fees, and would even fine them if they skipped over difficult passages in the Justinian Codex. They demanded absolute transparency and value, making sure the law was taught rigorously and fairly.
But, unfortunately, humanity has a real habit of letting open legal classes harden right back into closed castes over time. Fast forward to our modern era, and the legal profession has once again become this highly specialized, tightly controlled group. As global relationships and digital peer-to-peer interactions completely outpace the rate that traditional lawyers can keep up with, The cost of legal services has just skyrocketed, and that effectively locks out anyone who isn't wealthy.
Today's legal cartel relies heavily on the unlicensed practice of law, or UPL, as their modern purity taboo. These outdated UPL regulations are specifically used to throttle technological innovation. It keeps legal services artificially expensive and firmly locked in the hands of a licensed few. It just creates way too much risk for innovators operating within traditional nation-states, acting as a massive, modern-day barrier to legal engineering.
So to break this modern monopoly, we actually have to upgrade language itself through computational precision. Think of it as a prescient rhyme to the industrialization of transport. We're transitioning from a heavy reliance on traditional human mental labor, what you might call the wet brain muscles of lawyers dealing with imprecise language, to highly literate engineers creating precise, machine-readable language through computation.
Just like we moved from horse-drawn carriages driven by direct muscular labor all the way to the modern automobile, we're breaking the modern cartel by mechanizing the mental labor of law in 3 clear steps. First, we have direct labor. That's the traditional lawyer relying on human memory. Now we're entering the mechanical labor phase with emerging law tech and smart contracts. And eventually, just like we're seeing with autonomous vehicles, we'll reach a fully automated, trustless legal future where machines handle all the heavy lifting of legal execution.
To put that into perspective, over the last century, transportation costs have plummeted 99% due to this exact kind of mechanization. But legal costs, they have skyrocketed by over 15% just recently. When you look at that, you realize exactly why this technological shift is so desperately needed. Right now, the entire agriculture industry in the US is literally less expensive than the legal industry. It's a staggering inefficiency. It leaves everyday people completely without access to basic justice or even the ability to start a simple business without prohibitive costs.
Which brings us to the modern equivalent of Jenius Flavius's whitened boards, legal engineering. Now, this isn't just basic legal tech, it's a real applied science. Legal engineering is all about actively translating our everyday social agreements, those messy, wet human relationships, into hyper-efficient, dry, computational systems like smart contracts. It's about creating bespoke, living applications that can execute agreements without ever needing a traditional lawyer to play the middleman.
And the impact is already astronomical. Early legal engineers like Charles Goldfarb, who helped invent markup languages, and Mick Szabo, who authored the original 1996 treatise on smart contracts, have already unlocked over $20 trillion in wealth. Trillion! By deconstructing and rebuilding legal concepts through markup languages and executing them on blockchains, they've laid the groundwork for an entirely new, incredibly abundant economy.
What's so fascinating here is how legal engineers synthesize 2 distinct fields. They're combining empirical, mathematical truths, that's scientific law, which focuses on prediction accuracy, with traditional legal law, which deals with the messy reality of human relationships. By applying mathematical logic and cryptography directly to social contracts, we can create trustless environments. And that provides abundant, accessible justice for everyone, completely stripping away the old, superstitious norms of traditional courtrooms.
But because the old cartel is still so heavily entrenched in traditional nation-states, armed to the teeth with their UPL purity taboos, legal engineers really need a safe place to build. That's exactly why they're moving to experimental network states, like Prosper in Honduras or the Zuzulu movement in Switzerland. These special economic zones offer polycentric law. They act as regulatory sandboxes where innovators can boldly and safely build these revolutionary legal applications without the constant threat of being shut down by the old guard.
The fight for open access to the law is thousands of years old. From the scribes in ancient Rome defying the pontiffs, to the students in Bologna actually governing their own professors, all the way to the legal engineers of today writing smart contracts in network states. The tools definitely change, but the battle between an open class and a closed caste remains exactly the same. Which leaves us with a pretty big question: what role will you play in breaking today's monopolies and engineering a fairer, more open future?